Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. Today's video is a book review times 2. In this video, I will be discussing 2 books by author Ronald Malfi. The books are his latest release, Senseless, and one of his older releases, The Night Parade. So after this quick intro, I'll be right back to talk about these 2 books. The first book I want to talk about is Ronald Malfi's latest release, which is Senseless. It came out on April 15th of this year. So the really surprising thing about this book is that the only part of it that intrigued me when I first heard about it was this stunning cover, whichever side it pops up on up here. But I was watching Michael Wurtenberg's review of Senseless, and not throwing shade here, Michael will be the first to tell you he does not give 5 stars easily. And he gave Senseless 5 stars. So that immediately bumped it up on my wish list. So the reasons that I didn't really, feel like it was going to work for me have to do with the synopsis and the premise. So I'm just going to read those to you and then talk about why, despite those, aspects of the book not initially appearing to be something I would be interested in, I want to talk about why they did work for me in this particular novel. So this is what Goodreads has to say about it. A page-turning, supernaturally tinged LA puzzle box thriller, Zodiac with Teeth, from the Bram Stoker Award-nominated and best-selling author of Come With Me. Perfect for fans of Riley Sager and Lauren Bukes. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. So I did read Come With Me by Ronald Malfi, and I gave that book 5 stars. I also read Blackmouth by Ronald Malfi, or Malfi. I don't know if I'm saying which way, but Come With Me, like I said, that one was 5 stars, and Blackmouth was 3.5, and I think I rounded that to 4 on Goodreads. So, I mean, I had some success with this author, but Zodiac with Teeth, that doesn't really intrigue me. Perfect for fans of Riley Sager. I'm not a fan of Riley Sager. I think I've read 3 books by him, and I only liked one of them. And I've yet to read Lauren Bukes, but I do want to read her. So, like I said, that premise just, wasn't anything that really compelled me to grab this book immediately. And then when you get to the synopsis, what do you see? When the mutilated body of a young woman is discovered in the desert on the outskirts of Los Angeles, the detective assigned to the case can't deny the similarities between this murder and one that occurred a year prior. Media outlets are quick to surmise this is the work of a budding serial killer, but Detective Bill Rennie is struggling with an altogether different secret that keeps him tethered to the husband of the first victim. I mean, that sounds like okay, whatever, nothing that really grabbed me. What do you hear? Maureen Park, newly engaged to Hollywood producer Greg Dawson, finds her engagement party crashed by the arrival of Landon, Greg's son. A darkly unsettling young man, Landon invades Maureen's new existence, and the longer he stays, the more convinced she becomes that he may have something to do with the recent murder in the high desert. Yeah, I was like, oh, well, okay, fine. Finally, what do you feel? Toby Campen, the self-proclaimed human fly, begins an obsession over a woman who is unlike anyone he has ever met. A woman with rattlesnake teeth and a penchant for biting. A woman who has trapped him in her spell. A woman who may or may not be completely human. In Ronald Malfi's brand new thriller, these 3 storylines converge to create a tapestry of deceit, distrust, and unapologetic horror. a brand new novel of dark suspense set in the city of angels as only horror's Faulkner can tell it. I've read a few things from William Faulkner. A Rose for Emily is pretty much the only one I remember much about. And I mean, I liked it okay. It was nothing that immediately also, would have drawn me to read Senseless. Additionally, as you just heard in that synopsis, we are dealing with 3 points of view, and shifting points of view don't always work for me. So, obviously, this was not a book that I was just going to say, it just came out, I have to read it now. But I blame it on Michael. I blame it all on Michael. And I have to say this to Michael. Thank you. Thank you so much for your review of Senseless, because I am so glad that I picked it up. I didn't mind the 3 points of view. I was interested in every single one of them. And I don't often find that to be the case. If I am reading something with multiple points of view, I will typically prefer one point of view over the others. But in this story, I cared about the detective as he was trying to solve the case. I cared about this woman, Maureen, who is engaged to marry this powerful, wealthy man who has a weird son. I was invested in Toby, the weird, kind of creepy fly guy who is possibly involved with a woman who may or may not be a vampire. And I had no idea how all these storylines were going to connect and if it was going to work. But it worked for me. I listened to it on audio and I found myself trying to figure out more things I needed to do around the house so I could keep listening to the audiobook. And the way that it wrapped up, I thought was very satisfying. The loose threads were tied together nicely. And I just had a great time with this book. The next Ronald Malfi book that I'll be talking about is The Night Parade. This book was released in 2016. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in the bookstore and decided to pick up a book. And when I did, I looked at the horror section as I always do. And I saw that they had The Night Parade by Ronald Malfi. It was a book that I'd been interested in when Kristine and Cliff from Cliff's Dark Gems and Kristine from Secrets Read did this for their Fright Club book club a while back, and I wanted to get to it, and I didn't. But better late than never, right? So I grabbed it up on the heels of that 5-star review I gave of Senseless, thinking maybe this one can work for me too. So let me tell you a little bit about it. First, the birds disappeared. Then the insects took over, and the madness began. They call it Wanderer's Folly, a disease of delusions, of daydreams, and nightmares, a plague threatening to wipe out the human race. After 2 years of creeping decay, David Arlen woke up one morning thinking that the worst was over. By midnight, he's bleeding and terrified. His wife is dead, and he's on the run in a stolen car with his 8-year-old daughter, who may be the key to a cure. Ellie is a special girl, deep, insightful. And I'm just going to cut off the synopsis there because even the last little bit of it might give away more than you want to have going into it. I loved the way that this father-daughter relationship was written. This book not only had characters that I cared about, but the plot was, I'm not going to say it was necessarily fast-paced. There were parts that were slower, but they were well-earned and well-placed. The kind of juxtaposition between the slower-moving parts and then the quick, hard-hitting, jolting, terrifying parts, and even the parts that moved a bit slower, there was a constant sense of dread and unease. And there are familiar tropes that we see here, in novels about plagues or apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic novels. But Ronald Malfi has a way of subverting some of those common tropes and doing something different with them. The main character, like, you feel so much compassion for him as he's dealing with this terrifying situation. I also just want to read to you some passages that illustrate creepy scenes, and not only that, but also Ronald Malfi's style of writing. He writes these horrific, events, but he writes beautifully. He has, vivid imagery in his writing, and just you feel like you are right there with these characters. So just a few examples I want to share with you here. This is an example of not only beautiful writing, but that common theme we see in novels or films or series about impending apocalyptic events when everybody's just kind of going about their day-to-day business. And there is something about that that scares me even more than when the event starts to happen itself. The idea that, we as humans are going along, living our lives with no clue what's on the horizon. So this is one of those passages that illustrates that concept. It was one of those rare evenings he stayed late at the university grading papers. Walking across the quad, the night was a cold, wet soup. Late winter snow swirled around the lamppost, weightless as dandelion fluff, and never touched the ground. So that passage conveys so much. Like I said, the vivid imagery where you feel like you're seeing, the snow wisping around, you're feeling that cold. You're also, getting the sense that it's just, one of those nights. He happened to stay late. He's obviously a professor, right? Grading papers and just, enjoying the cold night air and appreciating it, I guess, as much as you can if it's a cold, wet soup. All right. And then he takes such care to make just those everyday, occurrences something that he writes about, things that other authors might neglect. Now, I mentioned how, at the back of the book, it talked about how the birds disappeared and then the insects took over. And here's just one of those examples. And he intersperses, scenes like this throughout the book. She just stared absently at the ground, at the incongruous burst of wildflowers that surrounded them, spitting occasionally into the weeds. Gnats orbited around their heads. So there are frequent mentions of, all kinds of insects, yes, but especially gnats. And I thought that was just a detail that was very astute of Ronald Malfi to put, because I know, a lot of times, especially in the summer around here, the gnats are constantly driving you crazy. But can you imagine if there were no birds to take care of, insects and stuff like that, just how much worse it would be? And I've tabbed so many things. I'm not going to read all of them to you. We get the explanation of what the night parade is, why this book is titled The Night Parade, what that means. I don't want to tell you, not that it would necessarily spoil it, but I get all giddy and excited when I come to a section in the book, or if I'm watching something and I realize where the title comes from. So I would not want to rob you of that joy. And then, I have a few other tabs where I was having some thoughts, taking notes about what I thought was happening, so I wouldn't want to read those to you either. And then we have another reference, like to zombie apocalypse movies. So this is not a zombie plague. These people are ill. They get this illness, they die, they stay dead. But, I think we would probably all, in cultural context would make zombie comments or zombie jokes if something like this happened. So one of the characters says, it's like them zombie apocalypse movies. The ones I'm talking about. Folks in those movies are always struggling to stay alive, to get from one place to the next place, to do whatever they got to do. But for what? You really want to live like that? So there's that awareness of what's going on in that comparison to zombie films. Then we also have these scary characters that our main character encounters along the way, as one would expect. Some characters doing horrific things. So you're going to have the human monsters that are going to be present in any sort of apocalyptic event. Now, you don't just have that. There's the other side where the main character, his name is David, so I don't just keep saying main character. David encounters the other side of human nature too, where people are willing to help and willing to take him and his daughter in and provide safety for them. Then there was also this sentence that felt very relatable, as we're, all very aware of what a global pandemic does to society, and to not only just individual countries, but the world, the whole world. But there's this comment that I underlined. The country had changed so goddamn quickly in the wake of this epidemic. And I felt that. That's so relatable when I think about how much has changed since we all dealt with the pandemic. Then there was a description of the way one of the people who had contracted this wanderer's folly behaves. The girl twisted loose and staggered like a zombie, a step or two in no particular direction, her one bare foot slapping on the blacktop. Her jaw chattered like some electric machine. So there's horrific visuals that Ronald Malfi is able to convey through his words. And then I just want to read one more passage to you that evokes that sense of doom and dread, and also showcases Ronald Malfi's ability to write. It had grown cold. Darkness crept up over the horizon, and the trees that fringed the parking lot trembled in the wind. What clouds he could see moving across the face of the moon looked malicious and virulent, like a poison descending from the sky. This book was, without a doubt, absolute 5-star read for me. If any of what I talked about in this book appeals to you, then I say pick it up. It's a contender for my top read of the year at this point. So how exciting is that, right? 2 5-star reads by the same author. If you've read from Ronald Malfi before, I would love to know which of his books you think I should pick up next. Just to recap, I've given 5 stars to Come With Me, Senseless, and The Night Parade, 3.5 to Black Mouth. So let me know which one of his books I should pick up next, because I am definitely going to be reading more of his work. I would also love to know if you have read from Ronald Malfi and you enjoyed or didn't enjoy what you read. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I would appreciate it if you would hit that like button, hit that bell, subscribe so we can talk about hopefully more 5-star reads. See you next time. Bye.